Sometimes you meet people and they take up all the air in the room.
Okay.
And then sometimes you meet people and they are a breath of fresh air.
Oh, that's a good take.
Yeah, and so that's what I would say about our next guest, Paula G. She's been known as the calm voice of jazz.
Or has that jazzy sound to her interviews?
She does. She brings a sense of flair and jazz and grace and poise. And so we just want to just introduce her to our community and share her amazing story with all of the Rich Relationship community.
And that's going to be coming up next on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. We're going to be talking to Miss Paula G.
Paula G.
Coming up next.
Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Paula G, thank you for joining us this evening.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you all for having me.
Is it late in the day? Is it late in the day, or are you a night owl?
I'm a bit of a night owl. I am a bit.
So I
come alive. Yes, I come alive at night, and I find myself to be the most creative around 2:15 a.m.
Oh, no.
You is an early bird, and I am a night owl.
Oh my gosh! Well, that's balance.
Yeah,
that's balance.
We are so excited about having you here, your wisdom, your expertise. I love how we met. We were both being interviewed, and you sometimes you sit next to people and you never know who's in the room with you. And so after I, got to meet you and fell in love with you, and then got to find out all the great things you've accomplished, I was very humbled by your humility, and I was just overwhelmed to find out that you can be so amazing and so humble at the same time. So tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you really enjoy about being a part of this world of sharing your story through radio and television and through books.
Oh, gosh. Well, I am a woman who has had a journey through life that I would not trade for anything in the world. I'm a woman who has transformed her life to bring me to the present stage of life that I am in now, working in media and using that as a ministry and using that to bless and encourage others that they can change their lives, they can live the dreams that they had so long ago. I always have this saying, it's by George Eliot, and George Eliot says it's never too late to be what you might have been. And I've adopted this doctrine that as long as you're living, breathing, and blinking, you can still be whatever it was that you quote unquote might have been or you always wanted to be, but you didn't have the opportunity to be because life started happening. And for me, I'm a living testimony to my own journey of transforming my life, of changing my life. Not that my life before was a bad life, because indeed it was not, but changing my life, transforming my life, looking deep inside at the gifts that God has placed inside of me, beginning to hone those gifts, train, practice, step out on faith, and to begin to utilize those gifts, and bringing me to the point that I am at today as a radio and TV host known as Paula G. Voice, Lady Wisdom.
Wow. And that's amazing to hear how the transformation happens, but how would you, when you first got into this industry, you started out in educational realm, didn't you, as far as a counselor or anything like that? How did you transition from that into the media side?
Oh, gosh. Well, I had always been told, sometimes you hear people say, people have always told me that, I'm good at writing, or people have always told me that I'm good at singing. So people have always told me throughout my years that, you have a really good voice. Have you ever thought about radio? And I'll back up a bit to answer your question. I'll back up a bit. So years ago, I worked for the YMCA. At the time I was married, my husband was in the military, and I worked for the YMCA, and I was a program director at the YMCA. And each summer, we, of course, had our summer camp program, and the summer camp program for the overall youth programs, that particular program director position really was the cash cow for the year. So it really determined the budget for the year. So around March or April, I would go around to the local television stations, radio stations, and this was in the Baltimore area. And this was back in the day when Richard Sher was on, I think it was WAL, with an unknown young lady by the name of Oprah Winfrey at the time. At the time. So this is dating myself. And, I would go around and do, you have the morning shows like, here we have Good Morning Atlanta, Good Day Atlanta. So, you have those type of morning shows, and they usually have some sort of community segment. So I would always go on for about 10, 15 minutes and talk about our summer camp program and give the details of, why all the parents should send their children to the YMCA summer camp program. And I would do that for the radio and television. And it never failed when I would leave the studio. Somebody, whether it was a tech person, a host, someone would always say, have you ever thought about radio? Have you ever thought about, television? And this is going way back when here in the Atlanta area, we have V103 with, used to be Frank C. and Gene Ross back in Baltimore, who have now transitioned to Atlanta area, and they both are doing some other things. But way, way back in the day, I remember doing a PSA on there, and someone, on there saying it to me as well. But being a military spouse for 23 plus years, moving every year, I didn't have the opportunity to plant my, into that. It was something that was in the back of my mind, but not something that I was able to really delve into at the time. So fast forward, 20, maybe almost 30 years later, life after divorce, when I became a school counselor, that actually came about after my husband and I divorced in 2005. Being a military spouse, all of my adult life, moving from duty station to duty station, I was basically a military spouse. So I had to figure out what my life was going to look like on the other side of divorce, which meant I had to get a job. I had to get a full-time, job to sustain myself. One of my daughters was still in high school. The other daughter was in college. So I went back to school. At that particular time, I was working as a paraprofessional. Went back to school for a master's degree at the age of, I think I was 40 at the time. At the age of 40, I didn't even know, Gil and Renee, I didn't know what a flash drive was, much less a laptop.
Right.
And my first day in class, it was a master's, and my first day in class, I just boo-hooed when I left class that day because, first of all, everybody in the class was like young enough to be my child. They were talking about flash drives and PowerPoints and presentations. Wow. I hadn't been in college in, almost 20 years. So I didn't know anything about, a lot of these different things. But, God always places the right people in path at the right time. My cohort was wonderful, was a wonderful group of young people who, once we got together, we learned that we all had a gift to bring to the table to make it work for our particular cohort. So they helped me with the technology. I helped them with a bit of the writing side, and we just gelled. So I became a school counselor. I was certified K-12. All of my career, I worked in school counseling for almost 15 years. All of my career was on the high school level. But I reached a point in about 2015 maybe. I reached a point where that whole proverbial, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Mm-hmm. Because in the back of my mind, I had these dreams of these things that I had wanted to do. Have you ever thought about radio? It's ringing in the back of the head. Have you ever thought about television? Yes. Voiceover was beginning. So all of these things were starting to roll around in the back of my head. And at the time, my mindset was, well, that's great, but you need to sustain a full-time job, and you went to graduate school, and this is what you need to do, and you can't go running off on pipe dreams. But somewhere along the line, I remember one day I was in my office and something just was like, cannot do this anymore. I've got to take this leap of faith and step out on these things that I desire to do: radio, television, voiceover. And that's what I did. I made that leap. I left education back in 2015. I actually wound up coming out on a medical and never went back. And that was the that was when that door opened. I said, there's no other time but now. There's no better time than now. And I have to take that leap. And I remember finding this plaque at King Center. And the plaque says, I'm looking at it right now as I'm sitting. It says, and the net will appear. And at that time, I said, okay, Lord, you close one door. I see you opening this door here. Not quite sure what it's going to look like on the other side, but I'm going to take this leap and I'm going to trust and believe that you will open doors of opportunity for radio, for television, for voiceover. And he has done that for me for the last 5 or so years. And it's been a journey. It's been a blessing. There have been peaks and valleys, but I have continued to hold God at the center of everything that I do. And he has seen through this journey. He has navigated me through this journey to where I am today. So I'm truly grateful and blessed to have these opportunities that I have and to have the opportunity to speak to the two of you.
Yeah. And you know what's so beautiful about listening to your story? First of all, I love your voice. It's so
well, thank you.
You're a great storyteller. And so behind that beautiful voice, like you mentioned, you know, you've been married before, you've been divorced, you've had your careers to change. What would you say to a woman who is in the middle of starting over again? You know, you mentioned being a military wife. What would you say would be the anchor to your soul and your emotions when you're having to make all these changes over and over again? What would you say to that woman or man?
I would say to either one of them what was said to me, but I didn't hear it at time, that there is truly life on the other side of that challenge, tragedy, trauma, whatever you want to call it. For the sake of this conversation, I'll say divorce. There truly is. I remember someone telling me that, you know, I was just on the threshold, and I looked at them like, you know, they had 2 heads or something. I was like, I cannot imagine, because that was all I knew was life as a military spouse was all that I knew up until that point. I graduated from college. My husband and I got married. He was a commissioned officer. I remember our first duty assignment was in Germany. Karlsruhe, Germany was our first duty assignment back in 82, 80. I'm really dating myself now. 82, 83. Yeah. Back there during that time. So I would tell them that there is life on the other side, that it is going to be a journey to find it, to seek it, that you have to first of all unpack the baggage of your past. So you're coming out of a relationship, you're coming out of a divorce. There's anger, there's hurt, there's pain, there's fear. There's all of these emotions that in order for you to walk in the fullness of life on the other side, you've got to pause. You've got to take that symbolic suitcase. You've got to open it up and you've got to unpack. You've got to unpack that hurt. You've got to unpack that pain, that anger, whatever those emotions are, because you can't have a successful future. Take all of those things with you into your future destiny, because you may, God may present another man to you. God may present another woman. And if you come into that relationship with a suitcase full of the baggage from your previous experiences, you're going to weigh that person down with all of that. You're going to weigh that person down, and you don't want to walk into another relationship with the echoes, I call it. Some people call it baggage. I call it echoes of your past. So that's the first thing that I believe needs to happen, is the healing. I'll use that as a holistic term, healing. Second thing is finding who it is that you are and knowing who that person is. And I say all these things from experience. It's not things that I've read in a book. I say them from experience. I remember maybe, that first year or two, and I was sitting in a therapist's office, and I'm a strong believer in counseling, therapy, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people may shun it, but I'm a witness. Yeah. that hour of therapy a week or whatever it is, it helps and it works. And I remember she was asking, she said, who is Paul? And I said, oh, well, I was a military spouse for 23 years, and I was an officer's wife. And she said, "Oh, that's very good." I told her all the things that I did as an officer's wife, and she said, "Who is Paula?" I said, "Well, I have two children. My youngest is this age, and my oldest is this age, and talking all these different things about the children." And then when she asked me the third time, I just broke down in tears because I really could not answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't answer the question.
And I think so many women are there.
Yes, because your identity is so tied up into these roles that and there's nothing wrong with those roles. I always, people tell me, if you go back, if you had to do it all over again, would you have been a military spouse? Absolutely, because, it taught me so much. I gained so much experience. As my former mother-in-law used to say, because my ex-husband was an Army brat, and she used to say, being a military spouse, she said, "Honey, it separates the girls from the women."
Oh, yes, it does.
He said, "Yes, you're a witness. It separates the girls from the women. You've got to be able to, hold down the household while he's CSTDY deployed on the battlefield, whatever it is. You've got to be able to hold down the household. You got to be able to put your big girl pants on and do what it is to do." And as an officer's wife throughout the different stages, when he was a company commander, when he was part of a battalion, there's certain roles, that as a spouse I had to walk and I had to fulfill when they were, deployed, and you were in that leadership role. You're the spouse that all the other spouses looked. So, you're setting by example, you're leading by example. Now that does not mean that you don't have your moments in your closet where, you kind of lose it for a few minutes, but that's in your closet. So after so many years of that, coming out of that, and now having to reinvent myself, that in itself was a journey as well. Being able to really sit down and look at myself, look at my strengths, look at my gifts, look at how I begin to use those gifts, how I can begin to use those strengths. And along that journey, as you're going through this transformation, understand that people who have known you in one particular role for so many years, it may be a bit of an adjustment for them.
Right. And you said a few things, Ms. Paula, that was amazing, and my wheels in my mind are just spinning, and I want to just ask so many questions because of life experience, and just from the life experience that you've gone through. You mentioned it with cohorts and support and military, and the resilience that you had to live up to just to bounce back, from those things that have happened in your life. How important would you say a person has to realize what their support really is as they transition into new endeavors and new environments, to be able to identify, where does my support really come from? How would you kind of address that for them?
It's crucial. A lot of times when we're having these conversations and questions like this we'll give the same, answer. And I'd have to give that same answer as well. First and foremost, throughout it all, God has been my rock. Yeah. He has been my rock. And I truly have had those late in the midnight hour of weeping and wailing on the floor, of my bedroom, and just being there by myself, afraid, angry, all of those emotions, and just crying out to God, during the night. And somewhere in the midst of all of that, just feeling his presence to give me the strength to get up off of that floor and to continue to live life. So I would say that would be first and foremost. Having good support system is crucial, but what's even more crucial is having the wisdom and discernment to know who those people are and who you can trust with that information. I have three friends, two who have been with me since college. They are actually the godmothers to my daughters that have been with me from the time I was 17 up into the present. I have confided in, I have cried on their shoulder, I have spent some time in their homes. They have picked me up off of the floor. Those are two ladies that have truly, I trust my life with them. I trust my children with them. And throughout, there's one or two people. So that support system, people who you can trust, people who are at some stage on the other side of where you're trying to get to. Because if you are looking for support, and there are different opinions on, if you're looking for support from someone who's in the midst with you, there may be challenges there, because if they're in the midst with you and you're needing some direction, you're needing a logical mind, a reasonable mind to help you come to a certain decision, that may not necessarily be the person that you can turn to, because they too are going through.
Right.
Some believe that's a great person to connect with during those times. But for myself personally, I need someone who's on the other side of that. If I could, because there were times where, I was not making the most rational decisions. I kind of had my waiting to exhale moments, if we're to be honest.
Right.
So I needed somebody on the other side of that to say, okay, put the matches down. We're not going to do this. So it's very important to have one or two people. You don't need a whole lot of people. One or two people that are good, that are faith-based individuals that will pray with you as well, and will give some spiritual guidance. Will give you some guidance during those moments when you are so blinded by your own emotions that you can't hear the voice of reason. Does that make sense?
Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships. Now let's go into our show.
Yeah, it's beautiful. and it's so good, because so many times, when you're going through things, you think, people say misery loves company.
Right.
I always tell couples, I tell people that when you're struggling, you need somebody who loves you, who loves God, and who is going to help you fight for what you should be fighting for. Because sometimes people want to fight for everything, and some things are not worth fighting for. Exactly. One of the things that I kind of, we talked about pre this our time on air was the importance of women realizing that there's strength in you that is apart from you being married. And I got married at 21. I'm a military spouse. I love God. I love my husband. But when I meet women, there is a inner strength that comes from knowing who you are in Christ that surpasses you being married or single. Kind of speak to that. What are some of the things that helps you to find your identity in Christ and not in, what was the point when you realized, like you said, you had to get to know Paula, that my identity is in who I am in Christ and not as a wife or a mother, or even as a radio personality, a television personality? Speak to that, because this generation is so consumed about their identity being likes and shares and brands and not the real person.
For me, it is being still within myself, being comfortable within myself, being comfortable in my own space and my own company. You were speaking to the likes and the shares, and we are in such a microwave society, and there's so much noise that oftentimes we don't have the opportunity to spend time in our own space, if that makes any sense. A lot of people, they say, well, I don't like to be alone. You have to get to the point where you are comfortable in the silence of your own space. That in itself is a journey as well, because there was a time where I myself was afraid of being alone, because I like when I'm by myself, then I start thinking. And when I start thinking based on where I was at that particular point in my life, I just spiraled down, and I had to get to the point where, I had these self conversations, and it might sound crazy, but I had these self conversations where, Paula, we are going to sit with ourselves until we are comfortable with ourselves. Because if we cannot be comfortable within our own space, our own self, and find out who you are yourself, I am authentic, I am poised, I'm virtuous, I'm vibrant, I am Paula. If I cannot find that space. I cannot expect anyone else, whether it's another mate that comes into my life or whether it's friends that come into my life. I cannot expect anyone else to be comfortable in my space if I'm not comfortable in my own space.
And I think that we are so afraid of being uncomfortable that we never really reach our full potential. And I did a post today. It said, your mind believes what you tell it. Say nice things about yourself. And so I love how you just had this conversation of affirmation with Paula, and other women got to hear that, because I think that people don't realize that inner value and realizing you're enough comes from what you say about you.
Exactly. I always have this, this phrase that I've always opened and closed my radio show with. And it states that the greatest conversation that you will ever have is the one that takes place in between your ears. What are you speaking to yourself? Is God a part of that conversation? And are you listening to his still small voice?
Right.
Yes. It's definitely that conversation in between your ears, what you are speaking to yourself about yourself. Because like you said, when that's positive, when those affirmations are positive, there's nothing on the outside that can hinder that. I used to tell my students, when they would come in and to your point, Renee, about the likes and, he doesn't like me, she doesn't like me, they're talking about me. And I used to tell my students all the time that I would tell them, do not allow the opinion of others to validate how you feel about yourself, because that person in turn may be having a bad day and they're taking it out on you, and you are thus internalizing whatever it is that they're saying that has absolutely nothing to do with you. But, they say hurt people hurt people. So when you internalize all of that hurt that they are unloading on you, you now have an opinion based on yourself, based on somebody else's dysfunction.
And that's unhealthy.
Yes.
And part of it is learning what we will and won't accept.
Yes.
And knowing how to say, no, thank you, I won't accept it.
Mm-hmm. I won't receive that. Exactly. You just have to get to a place of inner peace and inner joy. Inner peace and inner joy, and forgiveness is we talk about that all the time, don't we? Forgiveness is just key. You can't move forward, without forgiveness.
Paula, just listening to you, it's obviously from all the transformation that you've had to undergo throughout your life, faith has been a real big linchpin and a real big central theme in that. But you also, you mentioned going to college, and you mentioned a time of really working on who you are as a person. How would you describe how the importance that faith and preparation for your next chapters in your life play?
It is so funny that you asked that. It is, preparation is so very well, first of all, your faith is so very important, but preparation also is important. We've been meditating on this scripture. It's Acts 1-8, but the key verses have been verses 6, 7, and 8. And if I may, yes. So Jesus is speaking to his apostles, and he's breaking bread with them, and they're asking him about time and the wait. And it's as follows, where Jesus is saying, "Do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father." Did I start that right? Yeah. "Do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father promised, which you have heard me speak about. For John baptized with water, but in a few days you will be baptized within the Holy Spirit." Then they gathered around him and asked him, "Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" So they're asking him, when is he going to restore the kingdom? And he said to them, "It is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. You will be my witness in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." And after he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. So what we have drawn from that was basically what what Jesus was saying is when something will happen is not your concern, is not our concern. Our concern is to utilize the gifts that he has given us, to practice those gifts, to prepare those gifts. I used to have an elderly woman that used to mentor me, and she used to always say, don't get ready, but be ready. And this reminds me of that. Don't get ready, but be ready for such a time that God determines when he'll open that door for you, or when he'll open that door of opportunity for you. You know, we're in the midst at the time of this conversation, we're in the midst of this pandemic, and people are wanting to know, well, when is it going to be over? When can I go back to normal? When can I do this? When can I'm getting impatient. You know, I'm getting tired of being home. And, you know, what I hear God saying is, when this ends is not of your concern. What you are concerned with, I have given you gifts. And this is a time period for you to be still, for you to rest, for you to be patient, for you to wait on me, utilize those gifts, utilize those skills, begin to practice those gifts, practice those skills. So for such a time when we are on the other side of this pandemic, you will be ready to do what it is that I have prepared to do on the other side. So I know that's kind of a long way around your question.
Beautiful. No, it's beautiful. And it's funny because as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking about your story. I'm thinking about how, you know, you were married and you're a military wife and you're divorced and, you know, had these seeds planted about, you know, you have a great voice. And sometimes we don't realize that the destiny, that the journey is the destination. And all the things you've gone through were a part of God's plan to bring you to right now. But if you would have taken any one part away, you wouldn't be ready. And so during this time of us, I call it our timeout. This COVID to me is a timeout for God to get us still enough to hear the things he put in our heart. You know, like you said, the echoes of God's voice telling us, I've called you for this and for that. So I really believe that as a result of this time of us being in timeout, either one of two things are going to happen. Either we're going to be prepared and God is going to use this as a launching pad, or we're going to be stuck and we're going to be so concerned about it being over that we're going to miss the opportunity and we're going to be in more unrest than we were before it started. And so I love how you shared your story and shared biblical examples of there's more to life than marriage and divorce and the epidemic and goals and dreams. It's God's purpose. It's his plan. Purpose. That's what really prevails at the end of it all.
And, you know, we've often heard over the years, patience is a virtue. And it truly is, because throughout this, you know, I've heard wait. You know, you were watching on the news the other day and they were talking about all the states being open and, you know, you can go do this and you can go do that. And in the echoes of my mind, I'm hearing wait.
It's not time.
It's not time. Just wait, you know, just wait and be okay with wait and not having an answer or conversation beyond the wait. Just hearing God say wait and being okay with that. And
I love that you talked about that. You know, who do you listen? The Bible says, who's your report you going to believe? Even when we're just on Zoom with you, and just the calm and peace that you have. And so I think that we need to be following people who have a calm in the midst of a storm. You know, when there's a storm, you don't run to people who are just as frantic as you are. Follow the example of those people who are walking in peace right now. Let those people be your guide. Don't let the media and don't let, you know, external voices be your guide. Let wisdom and peace, you know, pursue peace and pursue God's word. Because I think that's going to be the greatest guide, not, you know, hysteria.
Right. And, you know, it's funny because you mentioned earlier about, you know, everything that happens in your life prepares you for where you are. It prepares you for your journey. And you were speaking to my calmness and so forth. And my faith, definitely. It comes from my faith, definitely. But it also comes from being that commander's wife in the midst of a deployment, you know, and having to be the voice of calm, having to be in those briefings and those meetings and, you know, having to share with the other spouses or reassure the other spouses, you know, during those times and being in those leadership roles. And I can remember a lot of times in the back of my head, you know, saying to myself, okay, Paul, you got to have to hold it together. You cannot embarrass Ferguson because if he comes back here and finds out that you fell apart, you know, so I used to have those conversations with myself. All right, girl, hold it together. because
That's like, get it together, get it together.
they hold it together now. He's gonna have a fit if he comes back here and like, you did what? So it's all of those. I attribute a lot of my being able to remain calm, to think in the midst of crisis, to my faith and being that military spouse through however many, I lost track of how many deployments, but just having to navigate deployment after deployment, staying a calm state, being able to focus and to function, that sort of, almost to a fault, but.
And that's great. And as we come to the near the end of this episode, one of the questions I always like to ask is, what advice would you give your younger self based on all the things that you've gone through and experienced over the last few years to get you to where you're at right now? If you were going back to talk to younger Paula G, what advice would you give her now based on what you know now?
I would say to her to be true to who you are and know that it is okay, and do not allow the input or the opinions of others to validate who you are, because your journey is different from everyone else's journey. And that's why you are so unique. And that's why you are so different, because God has something in particular for you and only you, in store for you and only you. And you must walk this particular journey that may be lonely at times. People may think you're a little odd at times, but it's okay. You will reap the rewards and the benefit on the other end if you remain steadfast and focus on the direction that God has taken.
Wow, that's good advice even for anybody today.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Right, absolutely.
And you, along the journey of your being different and being unique, God will align you with other unique, different people. And so I want you to kind of share with the community what you have, what's next, what's your next step, how can they connect with you, how can they hear your show and hear about what you have, your upcoming ways to serve.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you all so much. This has been a delightful conversation. I always tell people on my show, that we're having a conversation and the rest of the world just happens to be listening. So, so I really have enjoyed this conversation. Generally, across all social media platforms, I am Paula G. Voice, generally across social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My website is paulagvoice.com, and on my website, it has the list of my radio shows and my television shows. I'm currently on The Paula G Show on Survival Radio Network, Wednesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. I have a group page on Facebook, which is The Paula G Show. So your listeners can go to the group page to learn more about my radio shows. My television show airs on Thursday mornings, 11:30 a.m. on WATC2, that's TOO.TV. Woo-hoo! Yes. here in the Atlanta area. And I'm very proud to be a part of the WAT family as well. Yes. Oh, it's I just love being a part of that. Well, y'all know.
Yeah,
just love being Yes. Love WHC, and also the producer of my journey, Jerry Royce Live, Positive Power 21. And then also I'm on the journey because, I'm constantly reinventing myself. So I'm allowing the public to come along this journey so I'm beginning to build my YouTube channel.
Wow, great.
Yes. And I have different playlists. One is Fit at 60 and Beyond, where I tell the audience, you don't have to be 60, you don't have to be on, but I'm challenging fit. So they're about 10 to 15 minute videos, and I just, share some positive thoughts, some wisdom, and then toward the end, maybe a 1 or 2 minute fitness workout, just some suggestions for people, different exercises that they can do to continue their journey of, fitness as we enter the winter season of our life. And then I have a playlist of the Paula G Show, so all of my radio shows. There's a playlist of my television shows, and then also of live remotes with Survival Radio Network, where I've had the opportunity really to interview some amazing people. Also, my book, My Journey, Lady Wisdom After Midnight, was available on Amazon and Kindle and paperback. And it basically is my journey through my life to this point. And Lady Wisdom After Midnight, that's another show. But that's one of the radio names that I was given. And at the end of each chapter, I just basically share a lesson that I've learned, a life lesson learned. So I share a particular experience during my life and then the lesson that I learned. And one of the particular chapters, I'll just share this and you all can relate. I shared a situation years ago as a military spouse, and the lesson that I learned is never lock your knees at a formal event.
Wow. That's worth reading right there. Yeah. I was just listening to everything. I was like, you need something else to do. But we really, really have appreciated you so much on the show, and we'll actually list all that content and connection information in the show notes and everything that people can reach you. And as we always say, we are stronger together.
Let's grow.
Yes. Thank you all so much. And I just wish you all the best, and I pray that God continues to open the doors of opportunity for the two of you to continue to bless and encourage, because we need this. We need our relationships are under attack, and we need a show such as this to help to encourage, to keep those relationships, solidified. I'll say this real quick. I always say that, the end of my marriage was casualty of war, and casualties occur on the battlefield, but they also occur off the battlefield as well. So we've got to fight, keep our relationships together.
Yes.
So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You all. Blessings to you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful, or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.